impacts to our groundwater.
Yep.
At the turn of the century, open pit mining. And I would suggest that that might cause one to conclude that it forced people to go to the shallow springs that weren't impacted by the mining. So there could be a strong historic and mining reason, not just that they have deep valleys and mountainside aquifers, which they do, to tap. There could be a historic and mining reason why the predominant use of springs is where it is in the state.
And you can even see that more with cisterns. If you look at the relationship of cisterns, they're almost all in the heavy coal mining areas because that's where the groundwater has been basically trashed to the point where it's not economical to treat it. So they have groundwater, but it's so bad that they'll just collect rainwater instead. Yeah.
Well, I agree, and that says they didn't have a spring in their property,
right.
So well, we have to drink the cistern water that's augmented by pigeons.
Right. Any other questions?
Why aren't there more reports of people getting sick? I mean,
well,
are there?
Yeah, there have been studies, more national studies that have looked at the incidence of illness on people with private water systems versus public, and do find that it's significantly higher. But the difficulty is a lot of these things, first of all, they're chronic, so they take a long time to show up. So if you have a carcinogen in your water and you get cancer, are you ever going to really relate that to your water, especially when you're not doing hardly any water testing, for example. And with bacteria, with it being so common, the problem there would be a gastrointestinal flu-like symptom, which everybody gets routinely and thinks that they got it at work, or they ate something last night and it made them sick, and there's rarely any investigation to find out what caused it. And it can be especially difficult because people can get accustomed to these bacteria. So I might live in the home, get sick early on, and then be fine, but somebody comes and visits my house and they get sick, or especially young children do. So it's very, very difficult to draw direct relationships without getting a lot of health data, which is not easy to do. Some people have done it and tried to show those relationships, but it's really kind of difficult to do.
I'll share a good experience of that. I was born and raised in Belleville, so of course I'm Big Spring Water.
Yeah.
1978, I moved to Milesburg. Milesburg at that time, their water system was the Wallace Run Reservoir, which basically took headwater from Wallace Run, routed it through. Natural soft water.
Yeah.
I spent the first month with on-again, off-again diarrhea.
Mm-hmm.
And I figured at the time, well, soft water and all, we're just going through an adjustment. And I got used to it. It quit. Of course, now, in the end, DEP came in and said, oh, E. coli, through the roof. Take this system offline.
Mm-hmm. So
they forced the borough to shut that down. Of course, now we're back to offline water again. But in retrospect, looking back, I adjusted to the E. coli after being there. And of course, the local people had no problems. Nobody complained. I talked to the neighbors and I said, no, we're fine. And they were drinking the same water for years.
And the real hurdle that we have, there's two of them actually, on a private water system at least. Now, public should be testing that stuff routinely and finding out if it's a problem now. But on a private system, first of all, you got to get people to test their water and test it for the right things. And then you got to get them to understand what the results mean. And those are two actually pretty big hurdles. We always used to think that it was just a matter of getting people to test their water. And then Marcellus came along and everybody got their water tested. But we found that when we interviewed them, even though they had a water test in front of them, they couldn't tell us what was wrong with their water. They couldn't understand the results. So there's big hurdles to overcome there because these people are basically their own water system manager. They have to understand not only how it works and the plumbing and all that, but they have to understand what are the potential water quality problems. How do I even get it tested? Where do I test it? What do I test it for? How am I going to afford the testing? And how am I going to understand the results? And then what do I do when I find something wrong? And that's a big burden to put on people to understand all that stuff.
Right, and that's exactly the experience we have in my company with my water testing lab.
Yeah.
Is helping people understand what the results mean, and we find that there's another hurdle. They come in and say, I want to have my water tested, and they have absolutely no idea what it could be tested for or what they want to have it tested for. Sometimes they just want to have it tested. Well, then it's easy. We start with total coliform bacteria
Yeah.
as an important health-related starting point. But we every day see the ignorance of the general public regarding basic biology and chemistry.
Yeah.
That is and I looked at a couple of thousand results just for total coliform, and 23% failed. Well, that's a very biased sample. You shouldn't conclude that that's statistically valid, because people come in to have their water tested generally only when something's wrong. Odor, taste, sediment, aesthetic things. They're not on your extension recommended at least once annually and recommended twice annually.
Right.
You know, they're not. So something's wrong, and the most recent one with E. coli waste impact through the roof was, oh, the Amish right in the lot next door just dug a manure pit by hand, right down into the top of limestone bedrock. Penns Valley,
Yep.
true story, within 2 months. And you know, why do they stop digging? Well, they're into limestone ledge rock. They don't have hydraulic excavators. They're doing it all by hand or horse scoops. And they stop and then put their animal manure right onto the top of fractured bedrock, within 100 feet of the shared well.
And you bring up a good point that I really failed to mention, and that is, these are not statistically valid surveys either. These are basically, a lot of these were people that brought samples in, so they would tend to be biased high in the bacteria. And even the studies that were done were mostly people volunteering to get their water tested. So actually going out and knocking on doors and doing a statistically significant survey, that's not what this represented. That has been done, and I will say that the results aren't a whole lot different than what we've seen here, but still that's not what's represented in this. Yeah, Bob?
Yeah, you frequently look at E. coli, and then you also look at total coli.
Yeah.
And I think E. coli is signified as fecal count.
Right.
What is total coli?
So coliform it's a huge group of very common bacteria. They'd be on our hands as they're on these countertops. They're a surface organism, so they generally indicate a surface relationship. It could be just some surface water getting into the well. And that's the most common issue, is you've got surface water getting around the casing or getting in through the cap, and it's absent any fecal material, but it's still surface water that's carrying a lot of those bacteria.
And do you think that the non-E. coli coliform are significant from a disease standpoint?
Well, generally not, because the coliform group as a whole are largely harmless bacteria. And that's an important point you have to tell people when they get a coliform hit, especially without E. coli, is that it doesn't mean that they're going to get ill. What it indicates is that there's a pathway there. And the coliform group are generally called an indicator bacteria. They indicate that there's a path for bacteria to get into that water. They don't indicate that there's disease-causing bacteria, just that there's a potential there. And so some people choose to just live with it. They say, you know what, if that's all it is, I'm not going to do anything about it, especially if there's no E. coli, and that's their choice. Other people choose to build a castle around the well and see if they can prevent it, or they put in treatment systems.
Would you hazard a guess for the data that you showed for Center County, where I think the nitrate seemed to be kind of correlated with the E. coli? Would you think that those are kind of, coming from the same source potentially, or do you think they're?
We've tried to correlate nitrate and E. coli in the past without much success, so I don't know. I didn't try to do it for this data particularly, but we've tried to do it on a broader scale statewide. And never,
would you have a hazard guess on septic versus animal waste, or do you have any sense of whether it's one source or the other?
well, the only sense we have of that is when we did the large survey back in 2006 and 7, we did source track the E. coli that we found. So we went to the E. coli reference lab here and tried to at least figure out, is it animal or human E. coli? And there's an awful lot of, that science isn't real great, let's put it that way. But as near as we could tell, it seemed to be a lot more animal than human. A lot more animal than human. So that would indicate to us that it tends to be more animals, whether it's wildlife or domestic animals or mice in the wells or what. But it didn't seem to be a lot of sources that could be really clearly linked to humans. I hesitate to even say that because that science is not real great, but that's the best we could do with it.
I agree that the science is not real great. There have been studies relating the ratio between fecal coliform and fecal streptococci bacteria. And they've gone way out on a limb, I believe, not so great science, and even said that that ratio can tell you whether it's a horse, a pig, a cow, or a chicken, or a human. Well, the conditions for that to work are very short travel time and no attenuation of either of those two in the subsurface flow. So I've had limited success in making inferences, not conclusions, from it, where I'm in conduit limestone flow. Okay? I've had cases where that ratio confirmed the only potential target in the conduit limestone impacting the supply I was analyzing. But if you go into a more normal flow system and longer residence time, the validity of that ratio to identify human versus what animal is not good science.
Yeah. A lot of people trying, the DNA stuff now, everybody's trying to use it. But it's, in my opinion, it's just not there. I get calls routinely from people. This is the typical phone call. I got my water tested. I have E. coli. I think it's my neighbor's septic system. How can we prove that? It's never their septic system, or it's never their dog. It's always the neighbor's septic system, or it's the farmer next door. It's always somebody else in the neighborhood. But they're always looking for that method to prove it, and you know, it's a really difficult thing to do. There's no real easy way to do that. In some cases, there's no way to do it.
So what has Penn State Extension done in terms of like finding the sources or targeting the users, like the at-home audience? Like, is there at-home testing methods that you've put out, or is it more like, okay, we know that this is contaminated in this area. Are we going to focus on, I don't know, telling the farmers nearby or whatever it may be that's causing the contamination, how to deal with it, or what sort of...
Yeah, we offer a number of different educational resources, a lot of stuff online now that we didn't used to have. We have videos online to help people understand their water systems. We now have a water testing program here at the campus, which is available in any county extension office. And the reason we developed that was there are a lot of commercial labs like Todd's out there, and there's a lot of counties that are well served by labs, but there's a lot of counties where you have to drive a long way to get to a lab. So we wanted to get testing that people could get to easily. And so that's available at any extension office where they can go and pick up a kit and just ship it in the mail overnight to our lab. And so we wanted to try to provide more testing to people, more easily accessible testing. And we do a lot of work to interpret those results for people. We give them a lot of materials when they get their water tested and give them a person who they can talk to understand what does that mean. We go out and do workshops all the time, but we're constantly frustrated by the fact that, you know, unless the water tastes bad or smells bad, they're not likely to get up and come into an evening program or a Saturday program or any program if there's not something obviously wrong. And the problem is that a lot of these issues you're not going to know are there. So that's the difficulty, is getting people really concerned when they don't think that they are concerned about their drinking water. Okay, thank you very much.